You're a Yamaha endorsee and you use their Revstar guitar. What first attracted you to that instrument?
It was only where was it? It was PMT in Cardiff. I remember seeing it. I was still living in Wales at the time and just having a wander around Cardiff. Walked into PMT and they'd just been released. It was kind of like the new big kind of wall displays to this new release from Yamaha. I found it immediately interesting in the sense that it wasn't kind of obviously derived from another guitar. So many new guitars that come out these days are kind of like S type or T type or kind of like, Les Paul derived or whatever, And obviously Yamaha have quite a kind of an interesting, rich history of guitar making in their own right, not to even kind of mention any of the other kind of big manufacturers. So there's a lot of stuff to kind of draw from there. It's actually quite close to an old guitar called the Superflighter they made in the 70s. But I didn't know that at the time. So my first kind of knee jerk reaction was like, oh, that looks cool. And it's not derived from anything else. Let's take it off the wall. Love the appointments of it. Love the fact that I had a wrap over a tailpiece, at least initially. 2P90s, I was kind of like, well, that's kind of like my favorite iteration of a Les Paul is a wrap over tailpiece in 2P90s. Three-way toggle, just a very ergonomic, very simple kind of like stripped back bare bones rock and roll guitar, And I loved it. I just fell in love with it. Got in touch with Yamaha. I had a little bit of dealings with Yamaha with a previous band way back when. So I had a little bit of a kind of in with them. Got in touch and kind of started the ball rolling in maybe 2016, I think it was. And that's, flipping out 8 years ago. So been 8 years of playing the Revstar, probably 4 years coming up of like very frequently, heavily, consistently playing the Revstar. Prior to that, it was alongside Strats with my old band. But pretty much since the launch of Cardinal Black, it's kind of become the Cardinal Black guitar, But it's funny, we've just been on tour, as I said, and took 4 guitars with me and play a kind of either a jazz master or kind of like I was playing a Firebird style guitar with a trem for the first 2 tracks. And then as much as I had plans of like digging out the 335 for certain tracks or digging out the Les Paul, digging out the Telly for other tracks, just found myself every night from the second song onward, once I got past the track and needing the trem, it was just Revstar all night. And that's not through blind, devotion to a brand or anything like that. It's just, I love the idea of getting settled on a guitar for the night and kind of like being able to get the best out of it. And it kind of does everything I want it to do, really.
Obviously, you're associated with Victory Amplification. How did that come about?
That's a very good question. I can't actually remember. It was probably 2018, 2019, maybe. I kind of obviously been aware of Victory as a brand, kind of been super interested in them. I've gone through a couple of different Victory amps as well over the years. I think in regard to how it came about, it was probably the usual kind of, couple of emails back and forth with the Victory guys, nothing quite so rock and roll or interested really. But I've used a couple of different Victory amps over the years. When we started with Cardinal Black, my touring rig for a very long time, for all of the first tours we did actually with like Miles Kennedy or Peter Frampton or with the Struts, was a Fender Pro Reverb, the little 1x12 reissue they did, and the Victory Copper Deluxe. They're kind of like taking on an AC30. Those two in particular work really nicely together. So that was my rig for a very long time. Been kind of chopping and changing over the past year or so, really. I've gone down a little bit of a kind of vintage Fender rabbit hole. Been using a Super Reverb and an old 410 Concert on the last run of dates, which is probably one of the reasons our van was too heavy. So lesson learned there. But like I'm going to be using another amp as well that they just released recently, the MK Clean. I don't know whether that's meant to be a secret at this point or not, but we'll find out when they reprimand me for that. But they make amazing stuff. Martin has got such an incredible history of making amplifiers. I remember recording the Buck and Evans album actually a good few years ago now. Ended up using a Cornford Roadhouse, I think it was, in the studio for quite a lot of the tracks, and was just blown away by how good that sounded. But it didn't actually put two and two together for a very long time in regard to like Cornford being, Martin, Victory, didn't quite make the connections there. Little Grey Salesman working, but they're just incredible amps. They're lovely people, and they've been very supportive. And it's just again been very reliable, which I think there's a lot to be said for that. People take that for granted. When you are putting amps through less than ideal situations, left in cold vans overnight, etc., and sub-zero temperatures over winter. The fact you can dig it out the van the next day, fire it up, let it warm up a little bit, it fires into life beautifully. There's a lot to be said for that.
So, do you have any other sort of secret weapons in your rig in terms of like pedals and things like that?
Oh man, all of the pedals. I just figured that if you keep buying pedals, you don't need to practice, do you? So I'm just one pedal away from sounding exactly like Slash. Yeah, I mean, there's a load of stuff going on. There's some kind of not so secret stuff, which will more than likely be or will definitely be a signature model very soon. Actually, by the time that I come to ACM, I'll have a signature pedal out. So yeah, there's a couple of things going on. I've always been a pedal guy, at least since pretty much since I started playing Strats. When I was young, I was a Les Paul or Marshall guy, and anything else was witchcraft, really. As I said, massive Slash fan, so maybe a wah pedal, but anything else did not want to know. And as soon as I started playing Strats, just realised, well, Strats sound beautiful clean. So if you set your amp clean, they sound amazing. But then, of course, you need an overdrive pedal. So I bought a blues driver. Then started reading murmurings about the old Boss, the old Marshall Blues Breaker on the 90s. So I found one of those. And then, of course, as soon as you get one, you need another one. So it just kind of kept on growing and growing and growing. And yeah, I use a fair amount of pedals at this point. I think it always, for the type of music that we do, I think it surprises people that I have quite as many pedals as I do, because I think people assume it's going to be a kind of like a stripped back, bare bones, rock and roll straight in the amp job. But it's for like textures as much as anything else. It's again a very common criticism that, well, all of your overdrive pedals sound the same. I'm like, well, they might do. By the time it's worked this way through the signal chain and coming out the front of the house, probably does sound the bloody same. But it doesn't sound the same to me on stage. It makes me play in different ways. It inspires me in different ways. Some nights, an overdrive pedal that sounded amazing the night before might not sound as good for whatever reason. So I'll, maybe lean towards using another one more heavily. Different combinations of overdrive pedals, different reverbs, different delays, different trems, different modulations, all of this stuff, which I just love dicking about with, for want of a better phrase. It keeps it interesting for me night on tour. And I love the kind of building the more kind of ambient textural stuff in the background of songs. I think it makes it more interesting as a production, as opposed to just, me plugging straight in the amp.
Now, here's probably one of those questions that you probably get asked a lot. Are you working on any specific aspects of your playing at the moment?
I wish. I was thinking about this yesterday. I don't know whether I think it would be overly harsh to say it's laziness. I think it's probably just lack of time. Honestly, I wish I had more chance to practice. I wish I had more chance to put effort into like certain elements of my playing. I think I'm quite critical of myself because I spend a lot of time listening to myself just through the nature of the beast in terms of making YouTube videos or kind of like constantly doing content. You constantly listen to yourself, which I think is a good thing in the sense that it helps me improve. It helps me pinpoint areas of my playing, which maybe you're not quite as aware of at the time, don't sound maybe as good as you thought they did. I've always been a big advocate. I just as a matter of course, I will record shows, partly for the kind of like content element, but also just to kind of watch back when I get 5 minutes to listen to moments where either I thought something sounded cool in the moment, but maybe it didn't sound quite so good as I was giving myself credit for, or something that I thought was disastrous, and then you go back and listen to it and it wasn't actually as bad as you thought it was in the moment. So I think recording yourself is crucial in that respect. But the flip side of that is when I listen to as much of myself as I do, I get very bored with my own playing, and I wish I had more time just to put into kind of practicing, I don't know, certain techniques or certain ideas, or trying to find new notes, whatever. Just trying to find more interesting ways of playing. But just, I guess, that, as I said, the nature of the beast of doing so much, and whether that's family or whether it's work or whether it's the band or whether it's touring, the other side that nobody really sees of being a self-employed musician is that bloody hell, 90% of my day is spent doing flaming admin, emails or kind of like, banking or whatever, invoicing, all that kind of crap, and yeah, I could probably get away with getting a bloody secretary or personal assistant, but I couldn't really afford one, if I'm honest. So I don't really have the time. I would love to put more effort into my playing, but it's the reality, I guess, of becoming a professional musician is that, I feel bad for saying it almost, but I think I enjoyed guitar playing more when there wasn't the expectation of, well, you have to now earn money from it. It's now your job. You have to use this thing in your hands to put bread on the table for people around you. Inevitably, it's more fun when there's no pressure or no kind of like negative connotations attached to it. And one of the downsides of that is that I just don't get time to bloody play as much as I would like. It's weird because I'm playing a lot with rehearsals and with shows and with touring and recording and YouTube and stuff. I'm playing a lot, but it's like purely functional playing of like get the job done as quickly as possible and move on to the next. So more hours in the day would be helpful.
I'll see if I can get some for you.
Yeah. I don't think I'm alone in that sentiment though. So yeah. It's a very first world problem not having enough hours in the day to play bloody guitar. So I won't moan.
I'm assuming that obviously with Cardinal Black, there is still a lot of improvisation built into the set.
Oh, totally. Like, if nothing else, it would drive me mental if it was the same solos every night. I don't really see the point in that. As much as anything else for the crowd, like it blows my mind. There was a lot of people on the tour that we just did in Germany, seeing familiar faces every night, kind of following us around. Like we did thousands of bloody miles on tour, in this 2 vans in the end. But people following us around. So you think, well, if nothing else, I want to give those guys a different show to what they saw last night in Munich or Stuttgart or wherever. But for my own sanity, as much as anything else, I love keeping it interesting and playing different things every night. The only caveat of that, which I find kind of frustrating, is again as a consequence of social media, I guess, straight away the phones come out, people start filming, it ends up on YouTube, and it does kind of rein me in a little bit in that respect, in the sense that, well, this will probably end up on YouTube, devoid of any context, devoid of the context of the show, devoid of the context of what's come before it and what will come after it. There will just be this isolated little moment of guitar solo on YouTube where if I'm trying for something that doesn't necessarily come off, I just look like a dickhead who can't play guitar. So in that sense, it kind of does rein you in a little bit in wanting to just kind of like, well, color in the lines, make sure it's not terrible at the very least. Have that as the barometer, as opposed to try something new. Go for it. It might come off. It might sound incredible. If it doesn't, it's going to sound bloody awful. But it does kind of hamstring you a little bit in that respect. So that's my only frustration with live performance, is that I kind of wish I could go for it a little bit more, but it's constantly in the back of my mind that, well, it'll probably end up on bloody TikTok, be a viral sensation for all the wrong reasons. So, yeah, it is different every night, though. At the same time, kind of, even if I am still colouring within the lines to a degree, I love mixing up and just playing different stuff every night for my own sanity.
So I suppose to a degree, that's your chance to work on things.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's a good way of thinking of it, actually. Like I said, I just wish I could be a little bit more kind of free with it and be a little bit more adventurous and a little bit more kind of reckless abandon. But it's probably for the benefit of the audience that I'm not, to be honest. You don't want Jazz Odyssey every night, do you? So,
yeah, that's it. So you're literally having to come up with new ideas and practice, not only in front of the audience, but in front of the whole world potentially.
Yeah, totally. It is, and you never know what's going to go bloody wild as well. Like there's a video of mine on YouTube someone filmed me doing a solo in a tiny venue in Glasgow in like 2016 maybe, so like coming up 10 years ago, and it's on YouTube. Someone's uploaded it clearly with the best of intentions, saying like the most beautiful guitar solo in the world. It's had like 3 million views, and I've never watched it for fear of like, I don't know what that was like. I can't remember that gig. I can't remember whether I had a blinder or whether it was like a diabolical gig. But the fear of that video, kind of like not wanting to go back and watch it. But obviously someone's done that with the best of intentions. And I've no doubt I've made a lot of new fans through that video, maybe, But the idea of that then being on YouTube, something that kind of like I didn't have control over, I didn't have editorial control over, it was a live moment. It was had to be there kind of moment, but it's ended up on YouTube because that's the way everything works these days. Is a bit bloody terrifying.
If this puts your mind at rest, I've watched that video. It's awesome.
Okay, cool. I dread, honestly, I dread to think. It's just, if nothing else, it was like, I don't know, like I said, 8 years ago, whatever. I'm a vastly different guitar player to what I was 8 years ago. So just, kind of like all the little inflections or kind of like idiosyncrasies in your playing, which maybe were there at that moment, which aren't there now. I've never found it massively kind of like beneficial or healthy to kind of go back on dwell on like old recordings or old videos, just because you end up beating yourself up about it.
There's definitely a reason why they chose that one and uploaded it. And
okay, cool.
I think somebody's even transcribed it now. So there's
really?
There's the tab going below it.
I'm still not watching it.